So what is hunter-gatherer culture? I talked about this briefly. People that are familiar with anthropology know that chimpanzees and other monkeys are studied for their social connections. Hunter-gatherers are also finally being studied for their social interactions and things of that nature to show, how societies form, how societies thrive, how societies move forward, how societies fall apart, etc. So hunter-gatherer culture was the way of life for early humans until around 11,000 to 12,000 years ago. The lifestyle of hunter-gatherers was based on hunting animals and foraging for food. Anthropology, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so hunter-gatherer culture is a type of subsistence lifestyle that relies on hunting and fishing animals and foraging for wild vegetation and other nutrients like honey for food. Until approximately 12,000 years ago, all humans practiced hunting and gathering. Anthropologists have discovered evidence for the practice of hunter-gatherer culture by modern humans and their distant ancestors dating as far back as 2 million years. 2 million years, okay? Before the emergence of hunter-gatherer cultures, earlier groups relied on the practice of scavenging animal remains that predators left behind. Because hunter-gatherers did not rely on agriculture, they used mobility as a survival strategy. Indeed, the hunter-gatherer lifestyle required access to large areas of land between 7 and 500 square miles. This is to allow to find food they needed to survive. This made establishing long-term settlements impractical, and most hunter-gatherers were nomadic. Hunter-gatherer groups tended to range in size from an extended family to a larger band of no more than about 100 people. With the beginnings of the Neolithic Revolution, meaning where agriculture and things of that came about, when agricultural practices were first developed, some groups abandoned hunter-gatherer practices to establish permanent settlements that could provide for much larger populations. However, many hunter-gatherer behaviors persisted until modern times, as recently as 500 or 1500 CE. Now, what you have to understand, hunting and gathering is still very common. It was common in colonial America. It's still common in agricultural societies, okay? So this didn't go away. And you can think of agriculture as organized gathering, okay? Because you have to understand, in an agricultural society, the majority of the people are working the field. It's only the farmer, assuming the farmer is wealthy, it's only the farmer that's not working the field. It's the people that are working the field, his employees. The majority of people in an agrarian society are still working the fields. Over the last 500 years, the population of hunter-gatherers has declined dramatically. Today, very few exist, with the Hadza people of Tanzania being one of the last groups to live in this tradition. Now, what's important to understand, there's a guy, Walter Veith, and what's funny is he pointed out that, he showed the different foods at an African market, etc. Now, the reason you see so many hunter-gathering cultures declining is because of the incursion of commerce, the incursion of capitalism, the incursion of refined carbohydrates. Now, what Walter Veith had stated is it's interesting because modern society, the West, the United States in particular, wants everybody to eat like them. And his point was, you're the ones with all the problems, health problems, that is. Okay, now this has been pointed out before by Weston Price. This has been pointed out before by Dr. Atkins. He cited works. It's been pointed out by numerous British authors. It's been pointed out by Ben Clausen, the guy that wrote Salubrious Living. It was pointed out in the book Salubrious Living. The problem is, It's not subsistence farmers so much that have these problems. It is, unfortunately, modern Western society with its access to fast food, highly palatable foods, highly sweetened foods, highly refined carbohydrates that is damaging the phenotype and the body and the genome, because of epigenetics, of the human animal. And that's the problem, is like Walter Veith said, also the China study, T. Colin Campbell in the China study, who was sent to get Asians to eat more protein and discovered that casein is a primary contributor to cancer. Casein is code for cheese. Okay? So like Walter Veith said, why do you want everyone to eat like you when you're the ones with all the problems moving forward? So, what do we know about hunter-gatherers? Let's go through this. Hunter-gatherers. Okay, hunter-gatherers, foragers. Let's skip to here. So, in the quest to explain human culture, anthropologists have paid a great deal of attention to recent hunter-gatherer or forager societies. A major reason for this focus has been the widely held belief that knowledge of hunter-gatherer societies could open a window into understanding early human cultures. After all, it is argued that for the vast stretch of human history, the majority of it, people lived by foraging for wild plants and animals. Indeed, not until about 10,000 years ago did societies in Southwest Asia begin to cultivate, the area of the Fertile Crescent, like Mesopotamia, begin to cultivate and domesticate plants and animals. Food production took over to such an extent that in the past few hundred years, only an estimated 5 million people have subsisted by foraging, but while the number of recent hunter-gatherers may be relatively small, that does not mean that food production inevitably becomes the dominant economic strategy. Many such societies continue to forage. That's interesting, because what scientists have done, they've taken people that have subsisted on like if you watch the Weston Price documentary, you take people of the same genealogy, the same genetic background, and you look at the ones that eat refined foods, and you look at the ones that eat the traditional diet, and you look at their health. Okay? This has been done with the Zulus, and this has been done with the Yemenite Jews. Yemenite Jews, of course, are not hunter-gatherers, they're subsistence farmers. Okay? But the thing is, what you see a decline in health of the people that eat the foods of, as Weston Price calls it, the foods of commerce. That's code for refined carbohydrate. What can we infer about our distant ancestors by looking at a few well-known hunter-gatherer societies of recent times? To draw reliable inferences, we would need to believe that pockets of human society could exist unchanged over tens of thousands of years, that hunter-gatherers did not learn from experience, innovate, blah, 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 even blah, 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 blah. So below we summarize the cross-cultural literature. What they're saying here is that obviously hunter-gatherers over the course of millions of years learned stuff, innovated stuff, etc., etc., etc. Because cultures change through time, we cannot simply project ethnographic data from the present to the past. Now, this is of no importance to the diet of hunter-gatherers, because their diet has remained consistent. Below we summarize the cross-cultural literature, blah, 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 blah. What we have learned, we know about hunter-gatherers of recent times from anthropologists who have lived and worked with hunting and gathering groups. Some of the recent and frequently discussed cases are the Mabuti and Ituri forests and the Mabuti of the forests of Central Africa, the San of the Kalahari Desert and the Copper Inuit of the Arctic. These hunter-gatherers live in environments that are not conducive to agriculture. What are hunter-gatherers of recent times generally like? They are fully or semi-nomadic, live in small communities, have low population densities, do not have specialized political officials, have little wealth differentiation, are economically specialized only by age and gender. So keep that in mind. They are economically specialized by age and gender. Because this is something that people like Margaret Mead and other fake anthropologists that get the respect of being real anthropologists lied about. And it has destroyed the science of anthropology. They usually divide labor by gender, with women gathering wild plants and men fishing and almost always doing the hunting. They have animistic religions, so keep that in mind. This is one reason why I like to say we all started out as pantheists. I'm a scientific pantheist. Animism is not too far from pantheism, although the problem with animism is it gives rise to the worship of every speck of dust and sand and all that. But pantheism is the original religion of humanity. It really is. So they believe that all natural things have intentionality, meaning they have intent or a vital force that can affect humans. And to be honest, that's true. Everything in the environment, and we know this through epigenetics and ethnobiology, everything in the environment, and the environment is bigger than the immediate environment, the universe can affect the human to varying degrees. Of course, the further away you go, the less, less direct the influences. Complex hunter-gatherers. Not all hunter-gatherers conform to this list of traits. In fact, ethnographers of societies in the Pacific coast of North America have given us a very different picture. These hunting-gathering societies, many of whom depended largely on fishing in their traditional economies, had larger communities. This is because fish are more abundant than other things. They provide more minerals, more meat, more protein, more essential fatty acids. Okay, so when you're fishing and you have fish, now I don't think that fish, like when you're actually fishing, I don't think that necessarily counts as hunter-gathering when you're bringing in large quantities of fish. Fishing is a newer industry than hunting and gathering. For a long time, many scholars thought of them as anomalous hunter-gatherers. When you're providing fish as your main protein source, you're no longer a hunter-gatherer in my book. You're a pesca hunter-gatherer, okay, or something like that. Such complex, because the thing is, what you have to understand, when you're bringing in large portions of protein-rich, mineral-rich, fatty acid-rich food, like fish, you're not necessarily, you're getting some of the benefits, similar benefits to an agrarian society. And many agrarian societies, such as the Phoenicians, the Greeks, the Italians, the Romans, the Celts, the Japanese, the Okinawans, many of these so-called these agrarian societies, the Chinese, they basically are also highly skilled fishermen. So, complex hunter-gatherer societies in contrast to simple hunter-gatherer societies. So at least they are differentiating. They have a higher population density, fully sedentary or seasonally sedentary, more complex socio-political organization, primarily based on economic production, significant socioeconomic differences, some private ownership of resources and individual storage, competitive displays and feasts. Elites try to control access to the supernatural. While almost all hunter-gatherers have some kind of astronomical system, complex hunter-gatherer groups generally exhibit some solstice observation, so observation of the solstices and equinoxes. So they want to observe the seasons. This is because the seasons are important to animal migration, fish spawning, etc. Hunter-gatherer childhoods in a number of ways. Childhood in hunter-gatherer societies appears to be more relaxed and easygoing compared with most food producers. This is important to understand because kids today are pumped full of stress. They're pumped full of stress from the time they're born and they go to preschool, to the time they go to elementary school, to the time they go to middle school, to the time they go to high school, to the time they go to college, to the time they join the workforce, till the time they die. And this is why this is another big, if you understand the blue zones, there's no downshifting particularly in the American and Western cultures. There's no time to downshift. One of the things about the blue zones is people have time to downshift. Children in hunting and gathering societies generally have fewer chores assigned to them, such as subsistence work and baby tending compared with other societies. This means that kids have more time to play and explore their environment, but play does not mean that children are not learning about subsistence. So this is kind of like unschooling, if you're familiar with homeschooling type things. So this is familiar with similar to unschooling. And I actually think that, to be quite honest, unschooling is probably very important for very young children, because look at the state of children since we've been pumping their heads full of nonsense, since the time they're born, from birth till death. People are frazzled. In fact, much of their play involves playing at doing what adults do. So this is similar to the Montessori method. If you understand the Montessori method, they allow kids to learn how to cook. They allow kids to learn how to pour. Because this builds up motor skills, this builds up things. So in fact, now this is also true in agrarian societies, agrarian-centered societies. Kids learn how to make the home. Okay, so they learn how to make miniature bows. They learn girls commonly gather and cook. In some hunter-gatherer groups, a lot of real work goes on with these activities. So what they do is they turn the work into play. For example, Crittenden and colleagues report that among the Hadza and Tanzania, children 5 years of age and younger may be getting half their food on their own. So the children are getting half they're productive as they're learning, but they're not being overly stressed. Okay? Now this is a thing too. There's a thing about how children will work in the fields. My mom, when she was a kid, used to pick tomatoes and get paid by the bucket. And my mom actually came from a upper middle class family, but there were still farms and whatnot at that time in the area, and she would get paid by the bucket, the weight of the bucket. Okay, so you have to understand, in agrarian societies, kids were they're still doing these things. Okay, if you want to make money, if you want to get ahead, you do things. But it doesn't mean that it has to be stressful in these kind of societies. It's only in the new super capitalistic societies that you have this kind of stress. So perhaps to the amazement of many parents in North America, children as young as 4 build fires and cook meals. Now, anybody that's been in Boy Scouts knows that this used to be common practice in the U.S. If you look at the history of colonial America, this was not out of the ordinary. But think about this. So children as young as 4 are building fires and cooking meals, but they're not being overly stressed. Kids in many hunter-gatherer groups do not do as much as the Hadza, though, perhaps because other environments in other places are more dangerous. Dangers may include the presence of large predators, little water, or few recognizable features to help children find their way back home. Children also learn more directly from parents when they accompany them on trips. Hadza children on average hunt and gather about half their food. These children pictured above, so think about it, these children here are more productive and more self-sufficient and less stressed than the average child going to preschool, going to elementary school, and being pumped full of stress, pumped full of, you must succeed, you must succeed. They're succeeding. They're succeeding by gathering about half their food. Sharing with others is widely agreed to be an important hunter-gatherer value which parents begin to instill as early as infancy. Why are hunter-gatherer parents generally more affectionate? Research suggests that warmth towards children is more likely when a mother has help in childcare. What you have to understand, though, is this. Women should be taking care of their freaking kids. By putting kids directly into, into childcare in infancy, you're ruining this very important biosocial connection between the mother and the child. There's been research into Abraham Maslow's theories that prove this with rhesus monkeys and even young children, that when you fuck up that biosocial connection between the mother and the child, it really fucks up the kid's head, and the kid becomes aggressive and fucked up later in life. Okay? So the fact that hunter-gatherer children have more time to play does not mean that parents are not active teachers. So this is like unschooling, like I'm saying, and it's also like the Montessori method. In a study, see, this is the thing with the Montessori method, you're teaching kids math by doing things. You're teaching kids how to do shit that's practical, but you're teaching them shit they need to know. Okay? So parents do more teaching in early childhood. Other elders do more in later childhood. Teaching religious beliefs and practices is more common in adolescence and is often undertaken by larger communities. Now, people think that this is so... one of the problems I think we have... See, when I grew up, my grandparents grew up in the very early 1900s. My father was born in the mid-1900s. My mother's family, my mother was born later, of course, but what you need to understand is this type of shit went on in the United States up until very recently. Very, very recently, I would say post-World War II. Kids were doing this shit in agrarian societies because they had to. So it's not unique to hunter-gatherers. This is something that human society has done right up until like right now. Okay? So some research suggests that hunter-gatherers place different emphasis on valued traits for children to acquire compared to food producers. Hunter-gatherers are less likely to stress obedience and responsibility in child training and are more likely to stress independence, self-reliance, and achievement. Think about how American that is. Okay? Now remember, hunting, gathering, and agrarianism played an amazingly prominent role in the development of the U.S. mentality from the time the freaking Pilgrims got here and the Quakers got here. So, and of course the Mennonites and the Pennsylvania Dutch and the Appalachians, who are still doing it. So compared to food producers, and I wouldn't say that because, like I said, this is not true. Food producers encourage this too. Hunter-gatherers are less likely to stress obedience, responsibility, and child training, yada, yada, yada. But what they want is self-reliance and achievement. Okay? Keep that in mind. 4-year-olds are productive in these hunter-gathering societies. And if you're familiar with agrarian societies, young children are also productive at younger ages, but they're not stressed. Other hunter-gatherer differences: marriages amongst hunter-gatherers are much more likely to be with unrelated individuals or distantly related kin. This is, of course, good from a genetic standpoint. You don't want to be banging your relatives. Why? It is theorized that nomadic populations may need a wider network of kin who might be able to provide residential options in times of fluctuating resources. The songs of hunter-gatherers are less wordy, blah, blah, who gives a fuck? Why, as discussed, yada, yada, yada. Hunter-gatherer languages rarely have the sounds F and V in their... Okay, whatever. Are hunter-gatherers more peaceful? Fuck no. It is widely agreed that compared to food-producing societies, hunter-gatherers fight less. This is because they rely on each other more. So when you rely on somebody, you're less likely to punch them in the fucking face. So, but why? Perhaps it is because, in contrast to food producers, hunter-gatherers are less prone to resource unpredictability, famines, and food shortages. Okay, so all ages happily gathered together, sandmen and women and children, pictured in Botswana in 2011. Why are there these contradictory answers to the question about peacefulness? Blah blah blah. Okay, fighting is less common, but fighting less than food produced. Blah 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 blah. Gathering. Hunter-gatherers engaged in warfare at least every 2 years, but another study found that warfare was rare or absent among most hunter-gatherers. How we define terms will affect the outcome of cross-cultural study. When asking if hunter-gatherers are typically peaceful, for example, researchers will get different results depending upon what they mean by peaceful, how they define hunter-gatherers, and whether they have excluded societies forced to stop fighting. That is pacified. So what you have to understand, a lot of these societies, you'll see this with the Australian Aborigines and Polynesians. They're very, very, very fucking aggressive people. But when they were dominated by the British said, no, you can't be killing each other like you are. And the same is true for a lot of Africans. So, like, if you know, the Zulu, the Tutsis and the Mau Maus were murdering each other, but the whites put an end to that. A lot of times what you have to understand is when Western domination took over these hunter-gatherer societies, they were like, yeah, you can't be acting like fucking crazy people. Stop killing each other. Okay? So that's something that can't be overlooked. So how and why do hunter-gatherers vary? Hunter-gatherers vary in many ways, but cross-cultural research is focused on variations in the environment and types of subsistent contributions to the diet by gender, marital residence, the degree of nomadism, and the frequency and type of warfare. Now, one of the things that you'll find interesting with hunter-gatherers is the difference. I think you will see a big difference in how genetics play a role in the adaptation of specific people with specific genealogies and specific phenotypes to specific environments. I think you see that better in this type of research than you do by studying modern people. So variation in environment and subsistence practices. The closer to the equator, the higher effective temperature, or the more plant biomass, the more hunter-gatherer. Now remember, I talked about this before. So this is important. This is why you get healthier the closer to the equator you are, as you're eating more plants. The lower the effective temperature, the more hunter-gatherers rely on fishing. As the growing season lengthens, hunter-gatherers are more likely to be fully nomadic. In New Guinea, foragers with a high dependence on fishing tend to have higher population density and large settlements. Some of the foragers in New Guinea with a high dependence on fishing have densities of 40 or more people per square kilometer and settlements of over 1,000 people. Division by gender. Males contribute more to the diet the lower the effective temperature. So, as you move away from the equator, as you depend more on meat, as you depend more on fish, okay, so when you depend more on fish and game, of course men are contributing more to the diet. You have to remember, food is currency. Energy is currency. If you're familiar with biology, ATP is the universal currency. Well, amongst hunter-gatherers, nutrients are the universal currency. As we saw above, gathering is more important subsistence activity closer to the equator, since gathering is more often women's work and hunting more often men's work. This may account for the relationship. Now, agrarian societies, where you are depending on corn and beans and things of that nature, you will see a better division of labor. Why is that? Well, that's because the women and the men depend on one another in that situation. In higher quality environments, men are more likely to share gathering tasks with women. So, when you have a nice environment where there's an abundance of food, I forget who it was, gorillas will sometimes fight over food. Somebody said this in a documentary I was watching many, many years ago. And the funny thing is, you live in a salad bowl, but yet you're fighting over salad. So the thing is, with humans, you live in an environment where you can just grab your food. Well, the women and the men are more likely to share what's going on. Amongst hunter-gatherers, how much males and females contribute to primary production predicts rules of marital residence. More specifically, when male contribution is high, patrilocal residence is likely. When not that high, matrilocal residence is likely. So, when you're in an environment where men contribute primarily to the food source, you will see a higher degree of a patriarchal society. When not, you will see a higher degree of matrilineal society or matriarchal society. Not surprising, the more a foraging society depends on gathering, the more likely the society is to be matrilocal. The more dependent upon fishing, the more likely a society is to be patrilocal. However, degree of dependence on hunting does not predict marital residence. This finding is contrary to the general worldwide trend. Then all types of subsistence economies are considered gender contribution, blah, 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 blah. Who gives a fuck? Territoriality. Hunter-gatherers with richer environments are more likely to make territorial claims over land. Okay, this is because they need that land to feed their people so their people can spread. As it says in the Bible, go forth and be fruitful. Well, in order to go forth and be fruitful, you need living space. That's territory. Warfare. Hunter-gatherers with higher population densities have more warfare than those with lower population densities. Similarly, more complex hunter-gatherer societies have more warfare than simpler hunter-gatherer societies. I don't know how true that is because you have the Polynesians and the Australoids, although, yeah, I guess they were more complex due to their dependency on fish, but Australoids are they're very primitive hunter-gatherers, to the point where they didn't even have clothes before Europeans came. And what's interesting, They didn't need clothes either. The reason they didn't need clothes is their extremely dark skin absorbed a lot of the ultraviolet rays from the sun. So my point is, when you're coming to these highly primitive societies they were very warlike, okay? But what you have to understand about the Australian Aborigines, they did not have the same access to food and things of that nature, and certainly not water. So hunter-gatherers with a high dependence on fishing are more likely to have internal warfare than external warfare, meaning when you can provide for yourself, you get a little pissed off when people are taking the proceeds of your accomplishments and not giving you credit, if you get what I'm saying. It's like when you're working at a job and you're doing all the work, but somebody else is getting all the credit. Amongst prehistoric hunter-gatherers in Central California, resource scarcity predicts more violence, as indicated by sharp force skeletal trauma, blah, blah, blah. Among foragers, as in other societies, patrilocal, blah, blah, blah. What we do not know, why do some foraging societies share more than others? Is meat consistently shared more than plants? Yada, yada, yada. What you're going to see, and we do know this, I don't know why they're not talking about this, meat is often given to the highly productive members of the society and also to pregnant chicks and things like that because it's it's a calorie-rich food, okay? And these are people that need that food. Why should division of labor predict residence amongst blah, 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 yada, yada? Do foragers with high dependence on fishing tend to have higher population density and large settlements, as is the case in New Guinea? How different are foragers with a little agriculture from those who lack agriculture? Are foragers with horses more like pastoralists than foragers lacking horses? If you have horses, I would say you basically are a pastoralist. Okay, so moving forward. So this is from Union Kitchen. It's called Hunter-Gatherers, Ancient Diets, and Modern Humans. Imagine a world, no grocery stores, no restaurants, blah, blah, blah. Modern humans, if you want to be scientific, say Homo sapiens, first appeared on the East African plains some 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. They remained on the African continent until about 100,000 to 70,000 years ago, when certain groups began expanding to other locations. Today, humans can be found pretty much everywhere. Okay, it is also, so despite the long history, humans didn't begin farming until relatively recently. While it's difficult to definitively state when humans made the switch to agriculture, most assume that humans began farming around 12,000 years ago in the Middle East. Some argue, though, that it could have been as early as 23,000 years ago. What you have to understand is you're not going to find probably all of the evidence of farming, okay, especially primitive farming. It's also worth noting that agriculture popped up in various places completely independent of one another, while humans in fertile Western Asia were harvesting wheat, farmers in China were harvesting rice. Okay, utilizing local crops and other places. That's why you can judge certain milestones, certain cultural milestones. So when was tool making acquired from this or that society? When was tool use acquired? What tools were used? When did agriculture develop? When did society, when did organized systems of politics develop? This is how you can tell the different stages of civilization and different people. Unfortunately, due to the liberal takeover, the egalitarian takeover of anthropology, people are not as likely to look at these things, but they're very important to look at these milestones to see how advanced one society is or one civilization is to another. What were the limiting factors? Were the limiting factors genetic? Were the limiting factors environmental? They don't look at that no more. So farming versus hunting and gathering. Farming is often seen as far superior to hunting and gathering. After all, farming came with numerous benefits, excluding times of drought or pestilence. Farming offers a steady, reliable supply of food. This in turn allows for population growth, which in turn leads to the rise of civilization. The reality, though, is a bit more complicated. Farming led to significant societal problems that are too numerous to adequately discuss. These problems include war over land. See, this is the thing. There's been war over land, like I stated earlier, until the British and people of that nature were like, yo, stop murdering each other. There was constant war amongst hunter-gatherers. So farming and eating habits, let's specifically look at the impact agriculture had on eating habits. Those living in agricultural societies had a much different diet from their hunter-gatherer counterparts. And hunter-gatherer societies' food is varied. Everything edible in nature is up for grabs. Agriculturalists conversely tend to rely on a few crops, blah, 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 blah. The lack of variety led to significantly less nutrition reflected in the bones that archaeologists dig up. I've dealt with this in previous videos. There's a huge variety of foods, thanks to agriculture, available to the modern human. So during the Neolithic, blah, 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 these findings have led to significant debate among blah, 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 blah. Implications for today. Okay, so implications for today. While there remain a handful of hunter-gatherer tribes today, the vast majority of humans live in an agrarian or agricultural-based society. Nevertheless, we have much to learn from our hunter-gatherer ancestors. Among the lessons learned is the importance of a healthy, well-maintained diet. We all hear a lot, but looking at the lives of hunter-gatherers and their health really drives this home. This is very true, okay? But when you look at subsistence farmers like the Okinawans and some of the people in the blue zones, that drives it home harder, okay? These are subsistence farmers that are living to 100. In recent years, a growing number of people have begun to look to the past for modern nutrition advice, such as the paleo diet, in particular, has become popular to those who adhere to this diet, blah, 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 seek a return to eating habits, to nature, yada, yada. Does the paleo diet work? Yes, the fucking paleo diet works. Human genetics have changed since the advent of farming, yada, yada, yada. Break down grains, blah, blah, blah. So with all this in mind, does the paleo diet work? There does seem to be some potential health benefits behind the idea of returning to however, far more research is. Look, what does the paleo diet teach us? The paleo diet teaches us to get rid of refined shit. Also, when you're getting rid of starchy carbohydrates, like grains and white potatoes, you're going to have, you're going to get leaner, period. You're just going to get leaner. You're having more nutrient density with less caloric density. As we know, the Cron diet promotes longevity. So eating a Paleolithic style diet is beneficial. However, a paleo diet is not paleo, as we already know, because people back in the day did eat some amount of grains and things like that, but they were not eating refined foods. Legumes are a good food. Legumes, we know, contribute to longevity from research. Okay, moving forward. So this is what I wanted to point out, is people like to say that, people like to say, oh, well, agriculture is so terrible, blah, 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 blah. What you have to understand, chimps prefer human crops, and it's better for them. Entering agricultural areas to eat crops puts chimps at risk of injury or death, but a growing body of research suggests that the nutritional benefits of cultivated food keeps chimps coming back. So because there is a advantage to eating these agricultural produced crops, they come back. They risk getting killed to get the benefit to aid in their survival and reproduction. In a recent paper, a team of researchers carefully studied the diets of chimpanzees in Botswana, Guinea, an area where their natural habitat has been partially cleared for farming. They found that the crops eaten by chimpanzees were better sources of basic nutrition than available in wild foods. So what do we see here? We see a need to eat a nutrient-dense diet, right? So the research also indicated that chimpanzees' foraging preferences are highly specific. Troops in different areas preferred different crops, indicating that any mitigation efforts must be informed by the realities of both humans and non-human apes sharing a particular landscape. Eating crops is a risky business for chimpanzees who run the risk of injury or death if they are caught by farmers protecting their livelihoods. But new research shows that crops grown by farmers can have important nutritional benefits for chimps. So remember, when everybody's like, oh, well, it's not agriculturally grown crops that are harmful to humans. It's refined carbohydrate, as I've been saying from the beginning, which may explain their willingness to put themselves in harm's way. Crops generally offer primates energetic benefits over wild foods because they have more macronutrients, okay? So, in the American Journal of Primatology, about the diets of West African chimpanzees that live within landscapes adapted to suit humans, crops have been selected by humans to be palatable and easily digestible, okay? And energy dense, meaning there's more calories in them, as well as being tasty and providing more energy. They are also convenient. Popping down to the oil palm plantation makes for a guaranteed lunch, far easier than traipsing hours to find a fruiting fig tree. Of course, this does not always go down well with farmers trying to make a living, blah, blah, blah. So the anthropogenic landscapes, yada, yada, yada. But there are clear payoffs for chimps who habitually eat cultivated crops, okay, that make this unlikely. So they have been found, so this is what you have to understand. Chimps that eat agricultural crops have been found to grow bigger, live longer, and lose fewer kids. They begin breeding at a younger age and have been less susceptible to parasites. So keep this in mind. You have this nonsense going around where parasites are good for people in a lot of these paleo culture bullshit fucking nonsense online. You have people, oh, hookworm is good for you. In fact, not the guy from York Cardiology. I want to make sure people know that. Not the guy from York Cardiology, but that Sanjay Gupta motherfucker. He did a thing where he was saying that, getting hookworm and other parasites is good for people because it mellows out the immune response. That sounds like bullshit to me, but okay. So they have found that, so keep this in mind, when chimpanzees are eating agricultural crops, they get bigger, they live longer, and they lose fewer kids. They begin breeding at a younger age and are less susceptible to parasites. These are all positive things, okay? They also seem to be more chilled out. Chimp populations adapted to eating crops often spend less time looking for food and more time resting. Understanding, now remember that with the blue zones. What do the blue zones offer? More downtime, more down regulation of stress. Understanding crop foraging. Bryson Morrison's research compares the macronutrient content, fats, proteins, and carbohydrates of wild foods and farmed foods. When this happens, okay, so blah, 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 wild food options decrease and are replaced by abundance of other foods in crop form. This sets the stage for human-wildlife conflict, blah, blah, blah. The analysis found that crops eaten by chimpanzees contain more easily digestible carbohydrates, less indigestible fiber, making them a higher quality source of basic nutrition for primates. Now, I know people are saying, oh, well, they have less indigestible fiber and more digestible carbohydrates. People should eat a low-fiber diet. No, these agricultural crops are still loaded with fiber compared to what the average human eats when they're eating refined carbohydrates. Okay, so keep that in mind. Like the Okinawans eat agriculturally produced sweet potatoes, but they're very rich in fiber. Okay, a lot of Blue Zones populations eat a shit ton of beans. The beans are still loaded with fiber. Okay, so chimpanzees may eat crops for many reasons, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, because they have health-promoting benefits. That's not like that, you know, and they're lazy. When you study criminal justice, what is the number one motivator for a criminal, or anybody for that matter? You want to get the most gain with the least amount of effort. Okay? So these chimpanzees have realized they're getting the most gain for the least amount of effort by eating crops. Okay? So drivers behind crop foraging behavior is a key to ensuring conservation measures. Yeah, I really think that maybe somebody needs to step in and stop farmers from killing chimpanzees that are stealing crops. I know in Pennsylvania, we have a farmer reimbursement for bears that take corn. Bears are common corn thieves. They come in, the black bears, they come in and they take the corn from the farmers. The fact that many crops offer primates energy benefits over wild foods means that they may be willing to take greater risks to acquire these foods. Now, what might be an interesting experiment is to create a permaculture food forest for these chimps. In fact, chimps at both blah, blah, blah have been observed moving through fields en masse instead of in their usual. See, now this is interesting because if you ever read The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, birds, fish, etc., they do these formations so that lower level animals can get picked off easier than those in charge. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to conflict over crops, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Okay. So you may have noticed that chimpanzee that was eating a crop was eating what? He was eating a fresh cacao pod. So this is from the Florida Fruit Geek. This is a cacao pod, the source of all chocolate. Chocolate's very high in antioxidants and essential fatty acids. Come from the cocoa fruit. Oh, I'm sorry, the cacao fruit. I gotta start saying cacao. The original chocolate is the fruit of the cacao tree. This tropical fruit is still the source of all chocolate and cocoa today. Every chocolate candy bar you've ever eaten, every chocolate ice cream, chocolate cake, fudge brownie, chocolate Easter bunny, chocolate milk. Oh my God, that's prejudiced. I'm amazed that they didn't mention chocolate. What are them? The Hanukkah coins. They didn't mention the Hanukkah coins. Every steaming mug of hot cocoa. They didn't say hot cacao you've ever sipped. It all came from this fruit. Something about chocolate and cocoa can touch us deep in our emotional core. For many people, during an emotional upset, blah, 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 chocolate, yada, yada. Cacao fruit is elongated, shaped like a skinny version of an American football, about the length of an adult's hand, and it can be red or yellow. Okay, the outside of the fruit is a hard shell which can cut with a serrated kitchen knife. Inside the shell, there are two different kinds of food, only one of which is used in making chocolate. One of these foods is the seeds, arranged in rows, each of the size, blah, 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 so they look like a bean. These are the source of the chocolate. Surrounding each seed and filling the rest of the blah, blah, blah is a white-colored sweet fruit pulp. Normally, when people produce chocolate, they discard the sweet fruit pulp. To eat a cacao fruit, you pop one of those pulp-covered seeds in your mouth and you suck off the sweet flesh. The pulp has a wonderful complex fruity flavor, sweet and tart with hints of citrus, mango, maybe even pineapple. The flesh reminds this dude a lot of a complex fruity flavor, blends of cherry moya. Okay, sometimes there's a hint of chocolate flavor alongside. Now remember, so that chimp was doing what? He was eating the fruit surrounding each seed, possibly the seeds too. So you're getting a lot of antioxidants, a lot of different benefits that you might not get from just eating cocoa itself. Then if you're feeling bold, you bite into the seed and you experience the explosive taste of chocolate in its pure, untamed, undiluted form. This stuff is powerful. It's bitter. It's not sweet at all. But wow, does it have an intense chocolate cocoa flavor. Not everyone can handle eating the seeds of the cacao fruit. I've seen people really enjoy sucking on the fruit pulp surrounding the seeds, but when they bite into the seed itself, their eyes go wide and they have to spit it out. Making chocolate from cacao fruits. Okay, this is the refinement process. Now, this is the thing. This is why it's very important to differentiate refined carbohydrates from refined foods. Cocoa powder is a refined food. Okay? However, it's a very beneficial food. A common question this dude hears about cacao fruit is, can I use the cocoa beans to make chocolate? The answer is, of course, yes. Apparently, it is possible to process cocoa beans in your kitchen into something roughly like commercial chocolate, but it's a bit complicated. I've discussed blah, 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 online, yada, 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 yada. To make fresh whole cocoa fruit is the highest, purest embodiment of chocolate, with an amazing bouquet of rich, complex chocolate flavors in the beans. Fermenting cocoa beans, there's a lot of information out there claiming that cocoa fruit needs to be fermented in order to properly develop its chocolate flavor. The way commercial growers process cocoa or cacao in making chocolate is to cut open a bunch of the pods, dump the contents, beans and fruit flesh together into a vessel, and leave it there for a few days while the fruit pulp ferments. They say this fermentation produces alcohols, acids, and other flavor compounds that work their way into the beans, helping to develop what will become chocolate flavor, blah, 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 and dry, yada, yada, yada. They dry and roasted. I'm not sure quite what to make of these claims. That full chocolate flavor only results from this fermenting and roasting process. Some of the best, most intense, complex chocolate flavors this dude's experience has been in the raw cacao seeds straight from the fruit. Did run into one challenge. So this is the final product of cacao beans processed from fresh fruits. You can read this to get more into it. This is a fresh cocoa pod. Growing cacao. Cacao plants are very tropical, yada, 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 but you can grow them in a greenhouse. Moving on. When we come back, I'm going to talk more about subsistence agriculture. That's all for this video.